Hello everybody and welcome to another board game discussion video. Today's topic is all about board game aesthetics. So this is something I've touched on a little bit in the past where I've discussed my top 5 favorite box arts. I've talked about art for games in general and the overall aesthetic in general for games, and generally the fact that I don't care when I'm playing any particular game, as well as talking about component quality and things like that. All in all, these things collectively come together to make the board game aesthetic. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this particular topic because particularly in the last few years, we have seen a surge in games whose primary selling points have a lot of times included, if not completely boiled down to, it looks pretty. It is a good looking game. It has quality components, something along those lines. And so I wanted to discuss a little bit about it at least. Essentially, I wanted to go over 3 main topics with this. First and foremost are some of the games and concepts related to board game aesthetics that we've seen especially in the past few years. Secondly, my personal thoughts and insights and observations that I've seen within the community as well as within my own gaming groups when it comes to these types of games. And last but certainly not least, essentially whether or not this has changed my opinion about board games and aesthetics and all that kind of thing. That said, of course, before I get started, if you just let me know anything and everything in the comments. What do you personally think about this? Are aesthetics a selling point for you? Is it something that you care about, don't care about? Do you care specifically about component quality? Let me know anything and everything in the comments. So jumping right in, let's talk about some of the games and ideas behind aesthetics. So one of the main ideas for aesthetics is the idea of bright, pretty pastel colors. These are generally calming colors, particularly for humans. And if you see something that is like stark white and like light blues, light reds, oranges, things like that, then it's going to tend to trigger a specific psychological response of, oh, that's pretty, and something about happiness, as opposed to things like black and dark brown. And those types of things that we see in some of these other games are generally going to be more coldly approached by a lot of people. So we see that in a couple of specific examples here with Azul. This is one of the best games of the last few years, and I believe it actually won the Spiel des Jahres. But you can see just from the box art that this is a gorgeous game. The art itself is really beautiful. You have these wonderful light pastel colors that come to you in the form of tiles. In this case, I believe it's Portuguese tiles, if I'm not mistaken, and like Alhambra and that kind of thing. But essentially in this game you've got gorgeous components as well with actual physical tiles. And there's another game, also Sagrada, that has the aesthetic of stained glass, where you have translucent dice that you're able to look through and you sort of create a design on your own individual player board. It's absolutely gorgeous and a really fun experience. The thing is though, that's just one example of how we can view aesthetics, right? We can see it as the actual aesthetics. What does it look like? We also have things like miniatures. We have seen huge numbers of miniatures, especially in Kickstarter games, and frankly, they have become much, much better quality, which is great. I'm not personally a fan of having a ton of miniatures, but wargamers have been doing it for decades, where they've been painting Warhammer 40K and all of these other Games Workshop things. But now we've got things like all of the cool mini or not with Rising Sun and I can't remember any of the other ones, but a whole bunch of different games from them. And you know, Cthulhu, Death May Die, the Kingdom Death Monster, one of the first really big ones, all of these crazy kinds of games with tons and tons of miniatures. Much higher quality, great 3D printing, great hand sculpting for the original molds, all of that kind of stuff. Really beautiful, and something that a lot of people take a huge amount of time to sit down and meticulously paint. But that is on the player. It's not necessarily something the company has to do. So what does that mean for the sake of the game itself? For me personally, again, I am fine with playing as a little cube, just as I'm fine with playing as, you know, a 1/10 scale replica of Cthulhu. I really don't care for me personally, but some people do. For some people, it really does make a difference. That said, I also consider the actual quality of things like cardstock and the cardboard for actual boards to be a huge component for aesthetics, because I'm one who tends to, you know, just like take the cards and like wiggle them around and stuff like that. And I like to have them have a feeling in my hand. Same thing, one of the things I often mention is the Castles of Mad King Ludwig. The cardboard in that game is extremely thin. It is very, very difficult to bend and break. And it's just aggravating to see that. Again, something that is very collective in this whole aesthetic idea. But in the last few years, we have seen a huge uptick in the overall quality of game design, as well as choices in color and all sorts of different stuff like that. So moving right along, as far as the board gaming community, what does this mean? Well, when it comes down to games like Azul and Sagrada particularly, these bright, happy, fun games tend to bring in new people much more efficiently than something like even Cosmic Encounter, which is a very simple game. It doesn't matter because it can look very, very intimidating. It's got a lot of darkened colors, and so it sort of solicits the emotional response of like, no thank you type of thing. But if you have those bright, pretty pastel colors, then it tends to elicit a more friendly and inviting type of response in people. So we see with games like, again, Sagrada and Azul, particularly in the last few years, being ones that a lot of people are drawn towards as first games. And I find that to be wonderful for the board gaming community. It means that we get new people. It means that more people are trying hobby board games, and then maybe someday you'll be able to introduce them to, you know, Cosmic Encounter or eventually Twilight Imperium, maybe your Legends of Andor, whatever it happens to be. But again, having that immediate aesthetic reaction is a great way to get people in. And so that's sort of a wonderful thing for the community overall. Although for me personally, miniatures, not so much. But, you know, some people love their miniatures. Which brings me right to point number 3, which is my personal opinion on aesthetics. Honestly, it has not changed too much. I still really don't care about what a game looks like. I do care more about component quality. If I have a game that is really bad quality, if it's got that really thin cardstock, that really thin cardboard, it's an X in my book. Or at least it's something that I view as a detriment to the game itself. I don't necessarily think that Sagrada and Azul are better because they look nice, but I do fully admit that they do look nice. So I'm kind of still on that same ledge that I have been. The great thing is, though, that as far as I'm concerned, designers, publishers, all that kind of thing, keep making these gorgeous games, because the fact is that I love the idea of bringing in new people into the hobby. I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and I think this is a great way to do it, because people are going to be more attracted to these types of games and these sorts of designs and that type of thing. It's just human nature. And so I like that we've got it. I love that we are giving people options, but for me personally, it just doesn't matter that much. I have never been a person who cares much about aesthetics overall, except in the concept of making sure things are organized. Other than that, though, nothing particularly matters for me. But as always, that is more than enough rambling from my side. I need to hear from you all. What are your personal thoughts on this? What do you like or dislike about particular board game aesthetics? What are your favorite looking games? What are your least favorite looking games? Let me know anything and everything in the comments below, because you know I love to hear all of it. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my various social media pages where you can interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really fun and interesting ways. But with that, thank you very, very much again for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you are still under quarantine, please stay safe, but regardless, I will see you next time.